If we were talking to a vendor that was like, hey, we used AI to do better Google Ads pacing, I could ask, why is that needed? All I want to know is that I'm spending my money. Our team paces within basically like 1.5% or something right now. Does it pace closer so it's easier on cash flow?
I'm still wondering if AI deserves any kind of premium.
We have centralization software and AI is key to that. It's like, how so? A lot of the centralization is like just stitch everything together, right? Normalize all the data. It's like, why does that need AI? Okay, welcome to the Digible Dudes Podcast. I'm David.
I'm Reid.
So Reid, we don't have an amazing title for this episode yet. So we will fumble through it in our intro here and then hope that our producers and marketers come up with an awesome clickbaity, pun intended, title for it.
Yeah, good luck with that.
So what I wanted to talk to you about was I forget what I had heard. Nicole and I listened to some podcast recently that was talking about how prevalent fish fraud is in the United States. And what they mean is, like, often when you're buying spicy tuna, you're not actually getting spicy tuna because there's not, unlike chicken and beef, those are heavily regulated when it comes to like from, how it gets labeled by the USDA or what have you. But when it comes to fish, you have so many independent fisheries and fishermen, and it's very hard to tell many fish apart once they've been cleaned. And so that's why you start mislabeling, or people mislabel things. Now, a lot of the fraud might happen overseas before it's imported to the US. So like a snapper is one of them. The stats I pulled were that 87% of snapper in the US is not actually snapper. Meaning if you're buying snapper at the store, 9 out of 10 times you're not actually buying snapper. And it's because it's a very, it's worth a lot, the fish is, and it's farmed overseas, or they fish for it overseas. And, as some profiteering individual is like, hey, I'll just call this other thing snapper, and no American will know the difference because, frankly, David's probably never actually had snapper and he doesn't know what it tastes like. Surprisingly, which concerned me a little bit, I know you do a lot of sushi, but tuna is mislabeled 59% of the time.
I wonder what the fish is that is being used to fraud the industry. So in the case of tuna, because tuna is pretty common and wide, and I don't think of it, maybe I should, as more of an imported fish, but it seems like there's plenty of tuna here in the States. So I'm curious, what are they presenting as tuna that is in fact not tuna?
This is where the episode really got my attention. The fish that's mislabeled is called escolar, I believe I'm calling it, and it's a very oily fish. This fish doesn't break down in our digestive tracts, so many people call this the diarrhea fish.
Oh,
so when you go and have tuna and you have a bad reaction, it's because they were most likely giving you escolar and not real tuna. And so anyways, this made me think, like, okay, so there's all this mislabeled fish that really it's hard to track down. So the episode, I remember now, it was from PJ Vogt, I think is his name, the host. He started a new podcast that it's called Search Engine. I think it's called Search Engine. We'll link it in the show notes. But basically, why it was so amusing to me is he said he was ordering from the same takeout sushi place 13 times, and the 13th time he was on the toilet, he was Googling, like, why does this make me do this? And that's how he discovered that there's this like fish fraud problem, and he ended up getting the fish tested, and he learned that it was escolar, and that's what he's having a bad reaction with. So now he's got to make sure, like, okay, is the sushi place I'm getting from really giving me real tuna, or is it, using this wax fish? And what it spawned for me was how much of tech is labeled AI that's not really AI. And I just thought it was really amusing because I think, similar to the whole 59% of fish is mislabeled if it's regarding tuna, or 87% for snapper, I believe that much of the tech today that's labeled as AI is not really AI. And this goes back to us with Professor Beaver at the first Digital Summit, where AI was starting to be thrown around as a buzzword. And so we had him go up and talk about the difference between, like, first of all, just like formulaic stuff versus machine learning versus AI. And what's interesting to me is it's now been 4 or 5 years since that first summit, is how much I feel like the problem's actually gotten worse versus better. Like back then, a few folks were calling their stuff AI that wasn't. And now I feel like, can you even call yourself a tech company today if you don't say it's got AI or AI enabled or whatever? And how much should it, I guess maybe my first question for you is, do you feel that the company should even be clear if it's even their AI versus someone else's AI? Like, does that matter? Or is it just the fact like, yep, in this case, let's take a very easy example. Let's decide that these large language models like ChatGPT and Bard and what have you are AI. Okay, great. They are AI, and now I use a plugin like, whatever, I hit their API and return it. Should I be advertising that, AI enabled, or is that similar to just being like, I'm on the internet?
Well, I think it's okay to promote the fact that you're using or leveraging AI, in this case, using your last example of GPT, as long as you're not, I guess, crossing over that line and suggesting or indicating that it is your own technology. So to me, it's a pretty simple, I guess, distinction, but doesn't mean, to your point, that a lot of companies aren't crossing that line and implying that, it's their own AI, or that, they're doing some unique applications with that AI. In some cases, that's true, but in most cases, it's not. I think the the awakening that we had and, were given by Dr. Beaver 4 years ago was I think he had 4 classifications at the time of AI, and that's what very few people understand. And so on some level, like, I don't know how much it bothers me that, fish fraud, bringing it briefly back to that, is concerning, for the fact that you could end up on a toilet, or that you're, being goose, so to speak, into paying, 2 or 3 times, the amount for a fish that isn't in fact that fish. Perhaps that's also on some level happening with AI and technology. But from what I remember, Dr. Beaver was like, neural networks is the more advanced. It's what he might say is true AI versus something like Microsoft Excel, which I think most people be like, that's just a spreadsheet. It's just Excel. That's not AI. But I felt like, said that was kind of foundational AI, as he was walking us through kind of the genesis, or I guess the chronology of it all, and that it still lives, like some of the basic arithmetic that we see, or formulas in Excel are some sort of classification of that. So is the more important thing here, the terminology underneath AI that we need to be better at, be more responsible for, or do we need to just rethink the broader, like, I guess, classification?
I think for me, it's more of what is the outcome I'm looking for, and does it matter? So it's like, I'll use an example that you'll be familiar with. But when we first started the company, I've been into these like note-taking apps forever because I hate taking notes. I want to be present in the meeting. And you'll remember that at the time I was testing a startup called Clark. And Clark was incredible. I still have not met one of these note-taking softwares that does a better job of summarizing the meeting. But they claimed to be AI at the time, but when I really pressed their team on it, they're like, well, no, yeah, we transcribe, sure. And then we have people overseas that are summarizing the meeting. And I was like, all right, that's fine with me. I'm comfortable enough with it. All I care is that I get a great meeting note summary. Yep. Unfortunately, they got bought and shut down. And so I've been searching for something as good as Clark since. So maybe I should just hire a virtual EA or something to go and attend every meeting of mine. So anyways, I've got several examples though of things that claim that they're AI, that are not really AI. But what I'm going to get to at the end of this all is doesn't matter. All you should care about is the outcome. As far as how they get to the outcome, I think you should be less concerned unless there's some sort of risk tied to it. Except for maybe just being a good, I guess, discerning customer. so that you don't get just like blatantly just accept, oh, sure, AI, yeah, magic happens. So first off, defining AI, what I have is that true AI is a system that can reason, learn, and act autonomously. So it must be able to look at things, let's say logically. It must be able to learn from those things, and then it must be able to take action on its own. And that's why I think like these large language models do qualify for me, because it's kind of a black box. We don't know how it's really doing what it's doing, but it's doing it. And I'm super oversimplifying here, but in marketing, the thing that we often see that people claim is AI is A/B testing and personalization. So you and I have been on a number of vendor calls where they're like, "Oh, we're going to A/B test and we use AI to pick the best whatever." That's more Professor Beaver spreadsheet though, right? Where it's okay, we run ad 1, we run ad 2, ad A, ad B. Which one had higher click-through rate, higher ROI, whatever, cost per acquisition? Great, choose that one. That is just based on simple logic, like a logic of this is higher than that one. Therefore,
rule based. Yeah,
exactly. So it's rule based. It's not real. Okay, another one, chatbots. So the hot topic in our industry, right? So most folks will say they're AI, but they're not AI because many of them are pre-programmed with some scripts or keywords or what have you, and they lack the ability to actually understand complex or nuanced language. So it's similar to, the best example I have is like if I'm trying to call Bank of America and it's like, it wasn't, oh man, I feel bad. I'm going to pick on Bank of America. It was a different institution. I can't remember now, but it was so funny because at the beginning of its IVR, it was like, hey, I'm a very sophisticated bot that can understand anything you're going to tell me.
Really?
Yeah. It said like,
it's an arrogant bot.
Yeah. And I was like, okay, cool. And it totally was like, I don't know what you're asking for. I'll connect you to an operator. I'm like, well, that was the biggest like quick fail of a bot.
Yeah, right.
Anyway, so most of them are pre-programmed. Even if they're on pretty tight rails, they tend to still be rails. Like even those ones that are trying to use OpenAI today, we know that sometimes it still goes off track. Therefore, they tend to be on very narrow rails. And that's why often you'll ask a question, it tries to return something from the knowledge base, it can't. And it's like, submit a message and we'll get back to you in 24 hours. So true AI chatbots would be capable of an actual conversation and learning through the process. As it even talks to me, it should be able to learn what my preferences are and respond to those preferences or the type of questions I'm asking.
Yeah. Well, getting back to the beginning of that thread, you mentioned that, do I really care as long as the outcome is met, meaning the end user or consumer? And I lean that direction, like meaning I don't care how you advertise it, as long as the price is right, for the outcome that I'm getting, then, but maybe I'm being too, I guess, forgiving or blasé about that, that we should be holding at least our industry to a higher standard when it comes to the way they're positioning technology. I'm not sure, how to, I guess, go about that or fight that fight. It's more, I think, the education, underneath that we need to spend time on so that people, can make, the appropriate choices when they're faced, as I keep saying, with the tsunami of technology. I won't put AI in front of that, but that's what they're hearing. And, I think that does bear some value, but it's still, you just get to the point where it's like, are you helping me scale? Like, so in the case of centralization, you didn't speak to that specifically, but that's a big one right now that I think has AI like attached to it over and over again. And it's like, well, how important is it that that actually is AI and how that works versus, the outcome that you're shooting for, which is, to be operating more efficiently in a centralized fashion.
It's a great point. And I'm going to say that because we've had some different folks talking about centralization on this, podcast. And when they say AI, longtime listeners may notice that I don't jump on it. And it's because I often feel it's not worth my effort. Yeah. Energy to go into it. Cause I don't really care how you got it done. It's like, okay, cool. So you get this thing done, but it is a head scratcher for me if someone's like, we have centralization software and AI is key to that. It's like, how so? Yeah. Right? Like, I'm not sure why a lot of the centralization is like, just stitch everything together, right? Normalize all the data. It's like, why does that need AI? That's back to the rules based or whatever, right?
Well, does it, does knowing or being able to validate somehow, I'm almost looking for now a third-party site or something that would do this, like, the way you have impartial reviews or a verified on Amazon verified purchase, where it's like, this is verified AI. That would be interesting. And then does that end up over time proving that verified AI is less prone to mistakes, is going to be more successful technology than, the example that you had with AI Clark, where it's like, there's somebody offshore that's actually summarizing this stuff.
Right.
Because then you get into the whole Big Blue, back in the day with Kasparov, like who's more effective? Is all this new AI actually, I guess supporting all the hype? I'd like to believe that is true, though, because the reason that all this is happening right now is because humans are going to err, and they're not going to be as fast or capable in most cases as far as scaling solutions, I'll say, not technology per se. And so that is what really was the catalyst for artificial intelligence, is faster, cheaper, more effective, on a variety of levels.
It's so interesting, though. You and I had a separate episode about, where we talked in some ways about this topic with pacing. So it's like, to your point, if we were talking to a vendor that was like, hey, we used AI to do better Google Ads pacing, I'd be like, why? I could ask, why is that needed? All I want to know is that I'm spending my money like that. And it's our team paces within basically like 1.5% or something right now. Does it pace closer? So it's easier on cash flow? Okay, cool. Now, if AI went off the rails and spent and it's whatever, 10% of the time, it instead of being 1.5% off, it's 25% off. It's very hard for me to fire the AI, right? It's like, because it's like you're buying one person and cloning them like 45 times, right, to do the job. And it's like, now if that thing is wrong, are you firing all 45 AI? It's like, no, right? Versus like if a human is off a little bit and they keep being off long enough, it's like, shoot, we gotta make a change on this. So that is one thing where, when you and I talked about this before, and I'm just using that example of pacing, first of all, probably not needed to be AI. Secondly, the accuracy better be more than 10x better, basically, because of the risk of it going off the rails and how hard it is for me to change something out if it goes off like that.
Yeah, I like I guess that point that when you adopt AI at scale, which I don't think you and I would ever advocate for, meaning, it is smart, and I think the majority of our clients have wisened up to that pretty quickly, not to go all in full bore with an AI solution, rather test it on one or two properties and see the impact, so that you effectively are hedging on what you're describing. You get the more human controlled nature, if you will, by limiting the amount of AI that you adopt or test, for a portfolio. But once you go ahead and, I don't want to say take the plunge, but make that decision that it is something now that we're going to use across, an enterprise, then the risk definitely goes up significantly. So it just, really hammers home the point: be responsible, be smart, know what outcomes you're looking for, be smart enough, I guess, or educated enough to get under the hood through that test, so that you can flesh out all that you can possibly get to make sure you're in a position to go broad.
Yeah. So I've got a third one here that's a little bit probably, I think, like some people might take some issue with, but recommendation engines and why.
I was wondering if Fiona was on this list.
So Fiona's different though, because we called it a recommendation engine, but as I was doing research on this, what they call a recommendation engine is different than Fiona. What they mean is more of like the Pandora or Netflix, like, hey, I select these 7 pieces of music or movies, and it's going to give me another, like.
That's called collaborative filtering.
That's what you call.
That's what it was called 10 years ago. I remember when I first bumped into this because of Netflix, or it was Pandora or something.
Yeah.
And it was like, how is it doing this? This is incredible. I was at that time, I was super impressed. I was like, it really seemed pretty smart. But AI as a promotional or marketing tactic had not exploded. And so the article I read at the time was like, this is what's called collaborative filtering. And It was just a different way of explaining what I think you were about.
I love it.
Yeah.
I don't think I'd heard that one from you before, but I knew you were super in the recommendation engines.
Yep.
So the reasons that I had researched why that's not AI is it's using historical data and just statistical correlations to basically to make recommendations. Say other people that like this have a high likelihood of also liking this, and so that's not AI. That's not trying to learn you as a person. It's just saying grouping you within this type of persona. Most likely, if you like Die Hard, you'll like Speed.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, they learned that Reid is okay with Bruce Willis and not with Keanu Reeves. Therefore, but it would have thought high correlation would have recommended it to you, and you'd have been like, "Holy cow, I hate Keanu Reeves. What the hell?" So, anyways, AI would be learning Reid, not just your thumbs up on Netflix.
Yeah, this does make me want to check in with the Beeve, as we called him, again, and see kind of how his opinion has or hasn't shifted over the last few years as things have just clearly advanced further and further. And will the definition you're describing be suitable 10 years from now, 15 years from now? Because right now I think it works, for the most part. I like it as far as the reasoning and the ability to learn and whatnot. But I'm just wondering again, as we advance and the technology, like within the AI universe, becomes more and more intuitive and intelligent. Whether that definition still would stand.
I wonder, it's probably less about, it's probably a couple things. So just riffing on this with you, I think some of it is our language evolves a lot over time. So like in the past, it may, as you were saying, what'd you call your recommendation engine?
Collaborative filtering.
I almost said contextual. Yeah, collaborative filtering. If that came out in 1988, that might basically feel like AI for how far along it was.
Yeah.
But when we have this slow march towards progress, like when AI, people were talking about it back in the 50s to now, you start needing to call them it's like Eskimos having 26 words for snow, right? Because they see so much snow over so much time. They don't just call it snow, but us Texans, we're like, that's snow, right? We don't need 26 words. And I actually was thinking about this related to cars, back to who cares how it's done, because it used to be 20 years ago, it was like, I want a fast car. And now if you say a fast car, that could mean like, I'm going to get a Tesla or I'm going to get a Camaro or whatever. But there's a big difference between if you were basically taking a survey, like, are you okay with electric or not? No, I really want the rumble and the noise. It's like, okay, well, so you really want a gas powered car. It's like, okay, I want a gas powered fast car, not just fast car doesn't matter anymore. Right. Or it doesn't do all the filtering you need. So I could see the same thing happening here with AI. Like if next year we had artificial general intelligence, maybe we don't need all these 26 words for snow, but if it keeps going on this prolonged timeline, then perhaps we start having these different words for snow.
I love that comparison. I do think that will be necessary. I'm still wondering if AI deserves any kind of premium, which right now I think that's one of the advantages that a lot of these companies are getting is they are getting more money for the software by using that. And I don't think that's, unless it is verified on some level, I don't think that's appropriate. So it is the markup on the fish that's not really a true fish. It's like, if they can get away with it, why wouldn't they? But who's going to police that, I guess? Is it realistic that, property management companies, I don't know, CTOs, like if there isn't any kind of FTC, if you will, for AI, then I don't know how the problem ever does get corrected, because it's not realistic to me to think that the buyer, at least in our industry, is ever going to be able to effectively vet that, understand that. So therefore, do we just have to accept it, or is somebody else going to help police and regulate?
And does it matter? Again,
yeah, it still comes back to does it matter, right?
Yeah, like I think about
well, if you're going to charge more, I guess that's what I was saying. It's like, but I guess buyer beware, that's
right.
on you.
Why should it matter? Like as long as the outcome is the same, right? Unless there's some other unintended consequence. Like I think about I'm not like super clued into healthcare stuff, but immediately it's like I was telling you how I rewatched The Insider with Russell Crowe and Pacino the other week. And if they had determined, let's just say, for example, that nicotine itself is what causes cancer, then you might want to outlaw nicotine regardless of its form, whether it's like gum or smoking or what have you. But that what they're instead, it's like all the things that go around it that help cause cancer. But if you chew gum, probably not going to get like a problem there. So anyways, not to get like, hopefully people are following like the broad analogy, because I definitely would quickly get out of my realm as far as like what are the negative consequences of just nicotine its thing if nothing else is surrounding it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's back to the outcome. It's like if the unintended consequence here was that we outlawed all nicotine, and let's say it's just not actually that, like that substance itself is not harmful. What you really care about is like the delivery device of it, and how harmful is that device, and that's what should be more regulated, if you will. So to your point on the AI and buyer beware, I think it's more of like, okay, does it matter, or do we let the free market sort of like figure it out? Because if someone could just say pixie dust AI on some marketing material and you make twice as much, you're right. Like a lot of companies are just going to take some liberties with AI when there's no trust radius for it. But the consumer at the end of the day, you would hope would eventually make its determination to say like, that's just as effective as this other thing. It's half the cost. So I'm going to use the other thing that's half the cost.
Yeah. I just think I don't know if the definition that you laid out, would meet, most people's expectations, but that's where it starts, right? You have to have some sort of consensus on what or how to define AI in order to really police it, or I guess also on some level market it. So it's your 26 different words for snow. Like I think there's a lot of confusion in AI, and therefore, it just kind of forces you to focus more on the outcome and the cost, which is probably the right thing to do, regardless of what kind of buying decision you're going to make.
Yeah. Well, I guess for me, and maybe this is more where I had a couple more categories, but we can move more into like some of the tips. So one of the things I was thinking about, like, what do we want our audience to know? Oftentimes when we've talked about different technologies that are maybe misrepresenting, we're like, hey, here's even when we like do our why Digible, it's like, hey, look, you don't have to use Digible, but here's the things you should be asking your vendor, right? Like that way, we're educating at the same time, and they know what to go ask, because we're in the weeds, so we know what we would be asking a vendor. So as far as like some tips to avoid AI fish fraud, as I labeled it on my notes, one of the few times I've taken notes ahead of time.
With the qualifier that it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, it doesn't. Well, it doesn't matter. Yeah, it doesn't really matter. I just said, so be skeptical of claims of AI and things that seem too good to be true. Ask questions about how it's used in this particular product or service. So this example, I think, is would be very helpful with things like ad copy. So if someone's like, oh yeah, totally, we use AI to generate 10 million unique ads for your campaign. It's like, oh, interesting. Could you tell me more about that? It's like, well, yeah, we run it through OpenAI and whatever. It's like, okay, cool. My concern might be that it's, that it's not aware of fair housing laws. How can you make me feel comfortable that you have some sort of filtering to make sure it doesn't accidentally, add 9,000,001 doesn't say something inappropriate for fair housing? It's like, and then if they can't answer it well, it's like, cool, seems exciting, love where that's going, but I don't want to use the AI then in this case until you guys can give me some assurances on that one. Mm-hmm. So whatever, just try to think of like what could be unintentional there. Now, in that case, what you could also be asking your agency is like, hey, I don't care if it's a human writing it or AI, but how can you assure me that like they're abiding with fair housing? It's like, because what does it matter? Like, are the humans traded on fair housing just because the AI is not? Maybe the humans also not. Mm-hmm. I said also look for obviously like independent reviews, talk to their prior customers, things like that. And this is more around like the unintended consequences of AI. So again, like as you said, my caveat is like, who cares how it's getting done as long as it gets done? This to me, because the air quotes AI is so new, there's a lot that we as just people need to learn about what can go wrong with it, with how many different situations, nuanced situations we have. So like if you were going to use a chatbot company that was like, we're AI first, or something. It's like, great. Do you mind if I talk to a couple of your, former customers or current customers, just so I can get a handle, on like, have they seen any challenges with the AI going off the rails or whatever? I want to make sure it's represented correctly. And then, don't, my last one is like, AI isn't a magic bullet. So just be aware of the limitations and don't put all your faith into a magic bullet. Right. So I think like in times like this, it can get really exciting. It's similar to like, when blockchain was coming out or, any of those other tech waves. I was thinking mobile first. A lot of folks like started to put all their hopes and dreams into this new thing because it does seem like, wow, the possibilities are endless. And on a long enough time horizon, the possibilities are basically endless with AI. Mm-hmm. But in our incremental next step, it's probably not going to be, the panacea. There's going to be some issues. And so do you want to be the early adopter or do you want to let someone else be the early adopter first? So it's just like, there is no magic bullet. It can't solve everything right now. So be a discerning customer. Don't just, if you ask a tough question and they say, wave their hand and say, well, because of AI, it's like, all right, that I'm personally not going to accept that answer.
Yeah. I think those are great tips. The only one that I might add over the top of that is if you can have somebody that's designated at your property management company to do that vetting. I think that what makes this so difficult, if not unrealistic for a lot of these companies, is they're doing this like kind of in different corners of the company at different times. And those tips are a good start, but is there kind of a default, questionnaire that you can do whenever you're bumping into this, but have somebody that actually knows how to go through that, with one of these tech companies. It seems like it's hit or miss on, whether they're CTOs or, God, what's the other acronym that's commonly used for things like AI integration? What am I missing besides CTO? Anyways.
Well, we had talked about like, in a prior episode, we said, can you expect to have like a head of AI or something?
Yeah.
And but it's interesting because it's like, even we see here, like we have a CTO, Aaron now, right? But IT rolls into him as well as, our tech team. Mm-hmm. But there's other companies where IT is separated, mm-hmm, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think there's no right answer to that. And it's more of, as a company, how many companies out there are really going to have a dedicated AI department? Mm-hmm. Probably not a lot, because it's hard enough for any company to just get the resources they thought they needed of yesteryear, right? So is Digible going to be hiring a head of AI anytime soon?
Probably not. I know who would apply, but I won't say that right now. But the funny thing would be, should you use GPT? Would that be an interesting way to even vet the AI itself? Like ask it, is this legitimate AI or not? I would be curious just to see what it comes back and says. But on some level, I feel like you need consistency when you're going through the vetting process. And that's really difficult to do if you're trying to coach everybody up on, the pitfalls or I guess the bad actors related to AI.
Well, maybe as a fun way to end this, what is something that you think you would most likely there's a higher likelihood of you getting fooled that it's AI or just buying into the magic bullet? So this is more of, how like everyone kind of has like, I'm thinking of, I've been using this with Trevor, but like in the Matrix, Neo, it's like the woman in a red dress and it's a distraction. So what kind of pitch could someone come to you and be like, oh, Reid, flashy thing, AI. And you're like, totally, 100, let's go.
So specifically for multifamily?
No, just anything that like someone could come pitch you and they're explaining to you that this magical thing that you've always wanted is real because of AI. And you're like, I would like to try it out. Sign me up.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to go to something I want to build. So I'd be maybe most likely to be the first customer if somebody actually pitched it to me. And it's personal, so my daughter Sterling, is type 1 diabetic. And one of the most challenging things in being a parent of that is obviously the nutrition, but like coming up with fresh ideas on different like for breakfast, for lunch, for supper, based on the inventory that we have.
Mm-hmm,
so
mm-hmm.
if somebody were to come to me and say, hey, we've built this bot to help parents, with kids that have type 1, and at any point it can just tell you like 5 different options that you could present to Sterling for lunch, based on what's in your cabinets,
Mm-hmm.
your previous habits, as well as like her sugar levels. So it takes into account performance, the outcomes of all that. I would be like, yeah, that's great, man. You finally did it. I'm going to be your first customer. So I think that isn't that true though, on some level, that, all of us are most likely, I hate saying it, to be duped or a little more gullible, forgiving, whatever you want to fill that in with, for things that we so desperately want.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where marketing and advertising kind of preys,
Mm-hmm.
and not to put it in a cynical, but it's true. It's like you see that and it's like, now how do I, tell you that I can solve all your problems?
Mm-hmm.
And right now, AI is one of the most common paths. It's a shortcut for so many companies to just say, I have the solution.
Well, this is why I loved your response, because it's why I asked the question. Is like, everyone has something that it really bugs them. And it's like, if you could wave a magic wand and say AI, right? You're like, okay, let's give it a go. Versus if it didn't say AI on this like magical recipe machine or whatever, you'd be like, how do I do this? Like, does that mean I need to enter in every item in my cupboard and I have to keep track? And like, it's like, because the fear is data entry and whatever, right?
I would be way more skeptical if you didn't tell me it was AI.
Right. Yeah. Right. Or at least like of maybe what you had to do to make it work.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So it's interesting, because I think that happens the same with like, as your centralization example, right? Mm-hmm. Is like, people don't want to hear like, yeah, we connect all the systems together and they talk. It's like, we connect, we've got all the integrations and AI takes care of the rest. And it's like, oh, okay. Yeah. We don't have to do nothing we have to do. So, I just think it's really interesting, and everyone always wants for that like magic genie. And then in this case, AI is like kind of the perfect scapegoat or whatever, like red woman in the red dress for buyers, because the beautiful thing is you can say, freaking AI, man. Like the salesperson is like, I couldn't tell you how it works. It's AI,
Yeah. It's so true.
Well, anything else before we wrap up?
No, I think it's only going to get more complicated, more interesting, and probably will be more ahead of AIs or some version of that as we look 5-10 years out. But not for this sole purpose, not even close, just as far as the vetting. It's more about taking advantage of it. But how do you take advantage of it if you don't really fully understand it? But I do think that that's going to be a new position. And when I say new, I feel like we've already seen it pop up in a few companies or places. I'll stop there.
Are there any sushi restaurants you want to warn people about?
Well, you got me wondering, although fortunately I have not been on the toilet after our kind of go-to sushi place. The one that is affordable, that would be the one that would worry me the most.
Yeah.
But maybe I'm believing too much in the marked up, like higher end sushi,
That's what I wanted to.
That's an AI thing, right? It's like, well, just because you charge triple for it, I'm going to assume that you have fresh fish and that there's no fish fraud here.
Totally. So I'm going to send you the episode so that you can listen to it. We'll include it in the show notes for people. But I have not had that experience, but apparently some people process this waxed fish okay, and some people don't. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I bet I'm one of those people that process it okay. And I bet I just always get bad fish.
Yeah.
And it's like, I've just been lucky. But
I do have to, I said I'm good, but do you think right now that tech companies are making more money? Well, that's not the right question. Would you pay more if you knew that it was AI?
Regardless of the solution?
If each one was equal, would you, if you were aware that was verified AI and that was somebody offshore, and that was full transparency, we're disclosing, I'm going to use the AI Clark thing. And one company actually is using verified AI and the other company is doing it offshore, and you had full disclosure on that, would you pay more for the AI?
Before you gave the Clark example, my first thought was no. And it's because I thought I would actually pay less because I'm super nervous because I've just seen the quote AI solutions go bonkers sometimes with a decent amount of frequency, whereas the right executive assistant overseas or whatever, I would trust more to learn me and do my notes and whatever accurately versus AI kind of going like getting a bad transcript summary thing. But I think it also depends like what outcome I'm going for. So like with Clark, it was always like a 24-hour turnaround time to get my notes. And if I could get those notes in real time, like in a platform from AI and have like a small degree of 5% off or something, I feel like I'd rather take that because I would love to be looking at a screen that's showing the notes it's taking and I can like quickly add comments during or whatever. But with all the note-taking programs I've used now, even I'm using Reid AI right now, it still takes like 30 minutes to process. And so 30 minutes might as well be 24 hours to me. Like, so in this case, I would rather have the human that I could go back and teach to say, hey, do this differently. But there's no feedback loop on the note-taking platforms I'm testing now as far as like, I don't like this format. It's like, you get it in this format because they've made it for 1 million customers and take it or leave it versus the VA. I could be like, I kind of really want it in this kind of format. Right. So in that case, I'd rather this, but I don't believe we're that far from AI being able to do the real time, learning what format I really care about for those notes and doing it in real time. So it depends on like what outcome do I really want?
Yeah. I asked that because I'm wondering if companies that are using verified artificial intelligence should be charging more or expect more, or if they should in fact expect that their product's going to, be valued less. And when I say that, just meaning what you said, where it's like I'd actually expect to spend less if I know that it's not humans. And in some ways, it's one of the bigger dilemmas that these tech companies face, and us among them. How much resources and effort do we put on this if, in fact, it all just comes down to an outcome, and that we're not going to get the benefit of having verified AI, in our solution set?
Personally, what I get nervous about is like meaning of as I think about the larger company ecosystem, if I'm making a solution and it's internet software cloud-based, at first, if you're the first one to market or early to market or whatever, you can charge more because you can charge on the value. But over time, as it becomes more commoditized, you can charge far less. And so this morning on my drive in, I was thinking about email. And back in the 90s, you could charge a hell of a lot to send an email or to spin up an email server for someone. But back then it used to be like, okay, it's a penny per email you send. And now it is so taken for granted that could you imagine trying to make an email company today? It's like, okay, am I going to charge per email? No, because no one does that. So now you have to charge like, I think Google charges like $9 a month or something, but you get the whole suite. So it's like, but we're not going to do a whole suite. So does that mean we can charge $2 a month? And what's the difference between $2 a month versus $9 a month and how hard it is to price? So I think over time, AI, if you will, like as the solution, at first you may charge more as you're first to market, but then if it's quickly like replicable by someone else because you get traction, all of a sudden all of you start competing again, and it just goes down to the lowest dollar because also you don't have you and I often talk about the t-shirt example. So how much did it cost to make this t-shirt? There is a bottom where you can't buy cotton, you can't get free cotton, right? So therefore, there's a certain value that the customer just believes, oh, you have hard costs. But when it comes to the digital age and when it comes to AI, when it comes to like online stuff, the buyer at some point is like, Salesforce, what's it really cost you to like provide me another license? Come on. Why are you charging me like $2,000? This doesn't make sense.
Little do they know.
So then you have to, at some point, like build some sort of huge moat around it, right? That where you can dictate and say, I'm sorry, sorry that my margin's 98%. That's on each fractional thing, but the R&D I put into this was millions.
Right, exactly. That's what's so difficult. That's a whole nother subject, but how do you build a moat, right now with AI? Good luck.
Scary. Yeah, scary. Well, save that for another time. All right. Well, hope you guys got something out of this week. And we'll catch you next time.